just to say I'm Gemma and I'm part of the Portsmouth Home Ed group. I'm not participating any experience or wisdom into this Zoom. I've just been asked to host this time. My children are still little. They're 9 and 7 and 4. We have some lovely parents who have volunteered to share their experience. They're either home educating older children currently or have home educated their children throughout the teenage years, and they're just going to share their experience with us and encourage those of us who are maybe having wobbles about that. People have already asked some questions for tonight, and we've whittled them down to 4 main questions, which are quite broad. We're just going to ask our volunteers to answer those. So just to begin, I'm just going to ask those parents to introduce themselves and just share where they're at in their home ed journey briefly. Okay, Kirsten?
Hi, right, so I've got 4 children and 2 are currently twins who are literally sitting exams and assessments now. So slightly frazzled, but it's okay, we're dealing with it. They are one's doing 6 and one is doing 5 GCSEs at the moment, and hopefully going to college in September. And then I've got a younger boy who's 14 and a daughter who's 11, so she's kind of just getting to that kind of key stage 3 age, if you want to call it that, as well.
Have they always been home educated, Kirsten?
No, so my youngest Imogen, she's never been to school, but the boys all went. So the eldest 2 came out at the end of year 3, and my younger boy came out at the end of year. They all came out at the same time, but it would have been year 1, end of year 1.
Thank you. Next, on my screen I have Amanda.
I've got 3 children, 3 boys, and we've been home educating for nearly 3 years now. And we're pretty much, Ashley, we've started GCSEs, and Dominic, he's 13, and we've just started on a few GCSEs, just starting early. And Francis is 10, he'll be 11 in June, and we're mainly, I would say, Key Skills 3 for most of it, except English. The GCSEs with Ashley, we're attempting 7. We're kind of winging it at the moment. Hopefully we'll be able to sit them mostly all next year. We're looking to do perhaps 1 November, maybe January. I'm just going by what I found on the internet and just hopefully doing my best. Fingers crossed.
You're great. Thank you so much. Right, and move on to Sally.
Hi, I'm Sally. I've got 4 children who are 14, 12, 9 and 6. So the older 2 are in the older children's zone. We've always home educated, and we're slightly different from everyone else in that we follow autonomous or unschooling approach. So we won't necessarily do exams. It depends what the children want to do. So slightly different from others in that respect.
Great, thank you, Sally. And Claire?
Hi, I'm Claire. I have 2 children aged 8 and 16. And the eldest one went to school for a few weeks when they were 4 and have never been back. The youngest one's never been to school. Like Sally, we are more on the autonomous approach, although not so much when the eldest one was younger. Both my kids are on the spectrum, so if you've got questions about SEN, I'll answer as best I can. But when my eldest one was younger, they wanted structure, and so we gave that. But now they're older, it's become less and less structured over time. We're not doing GCSEs at the moment. Didn't feel they were ready for them when they're sort of 14 when they were doing them in school, and looked at alternatives, and they like the GED approach, which is the American High School diploma. So it's because they don't know what they want to do GCSE, they couldn't decide what to pick with GCSEs, or if they missed something then and decided they wanted to do it later on, they'd have missed their chance and things like that. So the GED is a bit broader. So we're working, the eldest one's working towards that at the moment. But it's going to be a bit of a mix and match, doing a arts award as well. But they do lots of extracurricular stuff as well, which I think is important when applying to universities if that's what they want to do. So a young leader at Scouts, teach Taekwondo and things like that. And what they were volunteering in a charity shop until COVID hit.
Thanks, Claire. Peter, would you share a little bit about your journey?
So I was homeschooled up until mid-year 5. When I then went to school, until the end of year 8, and then I went back to homeschooling for various reasons, and then went to college at 16, and then university, and now I've got an 18-month-old baby, and the plan is to bring her up with unschooling, home educated.
That's great. Thank you, Peter. We have got B, who is in a car on her way back from London.
Hello. I've got 4 kids, 3 of whom are home ed. I have a 16-year-old who is at school, just finishing GCSEs, and I have an 11-year-old who is, I would say, mostly key stage 3 now, just because of the way that we home edited him. He did about 2 terms in reception, and we came out just because we hadn't really heard of home ed. And when we discovered it, it sounded great, so we just cracked on. We've just done what comes naturally. I've got 2 younger ones, and I guess what I'm bringing to it, because I appreciate that Indy is only 11. I've spent a lot of time teaching in schools, quite a few years, and then sort of teaching different qualifications, drama qualifications. I guess I'm that kind of behind the pearly gates of the schools, sort of representing the fact that perhaps I don't know everything behind those doors, and that actually it's not that mysterious and it's not that scary, and we can do it at home, and there's no magic formula that you need to have to be able to educate your older ones. So going with passions and going with enthusiasm is always a good thing.
Thanks, B. And Paula.
Hello. I've got 4 children as well. They've always been home educated. We started off with plans and then found that there's not much point having plans really. The boys are 19 and 16, and the girls are 20, just coming up to 22 and 24 now. And so we followed a pretty much unstructured approach. No, a completely unstructured approach. And everyone just did what they wanted to do, followed their interests. Plenty of wobbles along the way, but as time went on and it all worked out, the youngest one's he's having the easiest ride of all with it, because it's just, you'll be fine. So our guinea pig, our eldest, did very well, just following what she was passionate about. And so that just gave us the confidence to follow that route with everyone else, really. And everyone's happy. So, success in that regard. The second one did a couple of GCSEs. When she got to that age, she wanted to, and she did, and it was fine. And we didn't do any working up to that. They were just there for them to take if they wanted to, but she just got on with it herself and pursued that. Oh, I run the Farnham Home Ed group, and we've been going for 20 plus years now. So I've seen, although we've followed a pretty much unstructured approach, I think, having seen so many families go through, that time and pursuing different routes with that, and, being able to sort of see the patterns and see the sort of common frustrations and worries and concerns has been, I think, I don't know, just seeing that broad range, of approaches, and they all turn out okay. So I like to just try and encourage people.
Thank you, Paula. The first question that we had was, what can home educating older children look like? Does something change around age 11?
He seemed to do it himself, and just seemed to be wanting to focus on different things in more depth, and saying, I'm going to go and find it. Like the other day, he just went, I'm going to write a choose your own adventure story, but he wanted to do it in loads of depth and type it all up. So I guess my little nugget would be that often it comes without enforcing it. It almost is something that he naturally did, that he wanted to explore things in further depth and just understand things a bit more and be able to discuss.
Oh, thank you, B. Paula, did you have something to share?
Just the fact that one of the first books I read when I was thinking of doing this, it was the one that I sort of read snippets out to my husband and brought him around to the idea as well. But it was the Moores, it was Raymond and Dorothy Moore, I think, who were American. They're sort of the American grandparents of homeschooling there, home ed. He was a dean of a university and she was a remedial reading expert. So they had a lot of experience between them educationally, but they home educated their 4 children. In their books, they have a lot of studies and research done for the physiological changes that children go through, as well as everything else. But one thing that really stuck with me, which I think stuck through the years, it was the fact that the two hemispheres of the brain being separate until sort of the ages between, at some point between the ages of 10 and 12, the two hemispheres fuse. And at that point, like we were saying about the focus, at that point, suddenly there's a depth to which the child can focus a bit more. And that seems to tie in as well with the eyesight, with our eyesight shortening. So, you know, up until that age, we'd want to be looking at clouds and trees and everything. And then suddenly we're interested in closer things and more in depth. So I think there is something that happens around that age, you know, well, which resonates, I think, with parents who want their children just to play, you know, until that age. That seems to work really well. And then there's a natural thing that happens where they just want to focus a bit more on stuff. So I just thought I thought throw that in because I've always found that really interesting.
Yeah, no, that's good. Rachel, did you put your hand up as well?
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say I've got one who hasn't found that space to want to learn himself. So I've had to push him, and he's going to be 13 on Wednesday, but he's still not ready to do the independent learning. So it's not a case, I didn't want anyone to think that you get to a certain age and then it kicks in and they all do this. You know, I've got one who I have to push him. I have to say, right, come on, let's get this done. And he's okay with it. You know, he knows that's the deal. You want a home ed, we have to do the work. But he's still reluctant, and I still have to push it a little bit. There's nothing wrong with him. You know, he's perfectly capable, but he wouldn't do it himself without the push. So I don't know, you know, maybe for some, I don't know if he'd ever get to that stage. I wouldn't just leave him to it, I think, because he's got the potential to do stuff.
Thank you, Rachel. Has anyone else got anything to add on maybe, you know, having home educated in the younger years and then have got to that point where the children would have been going to secondary school, and, you know, how you've dealt with that transition? Does anyone else want to share about how that's gone for them?
Yeah, so I was going to say, so is it you're just saying, does something change when they hit 11? Is that right? Was that the first question?
Yeah, I guess, you know, what does it actually look like when you've been home educating your children and then they get to that age and inevitably, you know, maybe people from outside even questioning what's happening now, and, you know, how have you managed that transition?
I guess we had a bit of a roller coaster of emotions, really, because, you know, initially, you know, as I said earlier, all the boys went to school, and they came out sort of mid-primary because it wasn't working. I think partly for me, you know, I felt that there was too much sit down learning, there wasn't enough play, and mine were always the kids where, you know, they'd go on day trips and things. I always remember they went to Arundel Castle, and I said to one of the mum helpers, you know, how did it go? And she went, well, everyone else was sitting down with, you know, eating their lunch, and yours were rolling down the hill. And I thought, okay, well, you know, they don't need to be doing all this structured stuff. They need to be playing. So that worked really well. But my husband was always a bit worried about, you know, what would happen at that point when they would have gone to secondary school. So we had the bright idea of applying, and we said, you know, give it a go. I think David went for 4 days and Jonathan went for about 2. And it did cause quite a lot of tension between us. So I'd say more for us as parents, it was a real sticking point, because he was very worried about lack of opportunities in home ed. I was much more worried about mental health and whether or not they wanted to go. So anyway, we tried it, and you know, I said that's fine, as long as if they say they don't want to go, they can come out. So they promptly did after less than a week. And I think all the worries about, you know, we all, you know, obviously there are wobbles. I think various people have said you have wobbles all the way through. But one of the things that stuck out at me, for example, like one of my sons is really interested in doing product design. And when we did go to the school, he was sort of wowed with the equipment that was available, you know, that you could do metal, you know, metal work and what have you. But when I actually asked them how it worked, they have this kind of schedule of you do so much with home economics type thing, and you do so much other things. And actually the time that he would have spent was literally like 6 weeks or something over a 3-year period. And I started to think, well, does he really need to get that from school? And actually, you know, we've done things like the Arts Award, and he's pursued his own way of doing that. My husband is really au fait with computers, so he's kind of helped them with. We've had tutors as well, but he's helped them with things like computer science. And he's applied to 2 colleges, and both of them have, obviously we don't know what their grades will be, but both of them have accepted him to do a product design A level. So he didn't need to do, all those things we're thinking, oh my gosh, are we holding them back? Are we restricting their options? Absolutely not. So I think worries about, suddenly magically at secondary school, there's all these opportunities that will present themselves that you at home, you can't do at home. They're just worries rather than realities.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. The next question we have is, anyone willing to comment on how can I home educate my older children when I have a large family with younger children? Sally,
Well,
B?
Yeah, it's hard. I can't deny it. I think a lot of it is undoing that kind of idea that you've got to get it all done between 9 and 3. When school hours take place, it just can't happen. If you're keen on getting GCSEs done and you've got little ones, then you've got to. I think how we'll probably do it is we'll end up doing some stuff at the weekends. We'll end up. I mean, sometimes Indy and I are sat reading stuff and talking about stuff at 6 in the evening, or baking something, or trying to finish an experiment when it's dark outside. It sounds like it would be intense as well, but there's loads and loads of lulls and loads of downtime.
Thanks, B. Sally and Paula.
I'll say it obviously from an autonomous perspective, it works a lot easier. I can't actually imagine trying to get several children through GCSEs and have smaller children. What I find with the autonomous approach is that the older ones are much more motivated to just go off and do their own thing. So I can then help out the little ones that still need a lot more intensive parenting. And with the older ones, it's more about me facilitating things. So either providing the right materials, finding online courses that they're just going to crack on and do themselves because they've got that motivation to do it. So yeah, there's a little bit of research for me in the evenings and finding the right things for them. But other than that, I just provide things and they'll just get on with it. So it works really well. And that's not to say it's still not challenging. Just having a big family is challenging, but I don't think that home editing different ages adds many more challenges to that with the autonomous approach.
That's great. Thank you, Sally. Have you got anything to add to that, Paula?
I agree that with the autonomous approach, it's probably a bit easier, although I have seen, plenty of families go the exam route with that spread of ages as well, and they do amazingly. I think an important thing to remember is that I think one of the things that we're sort of conditioned into thinking is that every child in a family needs to have the same experience, the same childhood. I think there's something very special about that different position of siblings, and that each sibling will have a very different experience growing up. Well, our eldest is actually very similar to our youngest, but they've had very different experiences, and I would say that for us, our experience, because our eldest was very focused on doing stuff, she was very sociable, she wanted to be at things, she wanted to do any activity that came along. So we hoiked the rest of the family off to these things, and they kind of came along for the ride and just sort of did their thing and played with their little friends at these things. They could all turn around to us one day and go, Ellen had all this done for her and you provided all this for her, what about us? But everyone's been happy with their where they've slotted in with the family, and we have gone about it in a team way. I remember when our youngest was born, just turning to the others and saying, okay, for the next 2 years we're just going to learn about how to love this baby and look after this baby and keep this baby alive, and and meet this baby's needs, and that's going to be your education for the next 2 years. And everyone was fine with that because it was good fun doing it. So I think it really helps to not have that expectation that each of them has to have the same, they have to have the same experience as each other. We know that our sibling position in a family really shapes us. The experts can come along and spend a 5-minute conversation with someone and be able to say whether they're an older sibling or a younger sibling or an only child or a middle sibling. So, there's something very particular about that positioning in a family. one of the reasons we're home educating is to provide an individual experience for each child in a family. That's all going to be different between them all as well. We all know that within one family you get the whole range of personality types and characters as well. So individualized experiences and not worrying about it, and trusting is a huge thing for me. Trusting that each child is where they need to be position wise in the family.
Thank you, Paula. We had a question about SEN and we've asked Claire to answer that. So what about SEN, Claire?
It's tricky for me because I suppose I don't know any different. So I don't know what it's like to home educate. Both my kids are on the spectrum, although they pick off very different bits of the spectrum. So I don't have a child that isn't autistic. So I don't know what it's like to raise a child or home educate a child that isn't on the spectrum. For us, yeah, I suppose we've just carried on. And I think it kind of ties into the worries thing and how you get over worries. I think when I'm having a bit of a panic, I think if they were in school, I'd have worries as well. There'd just be a different set of worries. For SEN kids, I think home ed tends to be, other people's experiences might be different. It tends to be more inclusive and they're more able to work at their own pace. And certainly my eldest one, when they were a lot younger, were doing academic stuff with older kids, but then at the playground were playing with kids that were younger than them. So they were getting the social skills they needed and the right social skill age group, but equally the academics at the level they needed and things like that. So it was a lot more flexible, I think, right the way through. Like I say, I don't know any different, but I think home ed really can work for SEN kids, especially kids where, my children haven't got really severe difficulties. And a lot of the time, unless you've got really big problems in school, you're just going to kind of float along and not get, as long as you don't draw too much attention to yourself, you're going to just be left to get on with it and get lost somewhere on the line, I think. But if you've got any questions, then feel free to ask.
Hi there. Lovely to speak to you all or hear from you all. I have kind of found myself thrown into the home ed world. Oh boy, I took him out October last year. Because after they went back, the bullying just continued. He'd been bullied for a few years, and we hoped that the first lockdown, they'd forget what they were doing and he'd be okay. My problem is he's dyslexic. He's got really high aspiration. He wants to be an equine vet. With the SEN, is there anyone I can speak to with regards to getting any kind of help with when the exams come along?
Yes, there is a simple answer to that. Depending, I'm not sure where you're based, but
I'm Fareham.
Okay, Fairgos, unless this has changed, and if it has, someone else, please speak up. Fairgos, they do the assessments to find out what support your child needs in exams, and then they can provide that support at the exam centre itself. So you can do it all through Fairgos. I can't remember how much you have to pay for the initial assessment, but it's not a lot. I want to say about £40.
My children haven't got any formal diagnoses, but I suspect my elder two possibly are somewhere on the spectrum. So I've got one son who has been assessed and he has extra time. So it means he gets time and a quarter for his exams. So I had him assessed last summer. It did cost £100 to have him assessed, but it was worth it because he needs extra time to think and to process before he can write. I think if he didn't have that, he wouldn't be able to sit the exams. I've also got my younger one, William, who's 14. He definitely has issues with spelling. He's not got a diagnosis, but I think he will definitely need to have assessments. So he might be able to have a scribe, or he might be able to type. You do have to pay for it, but it is absolutely worth it if you are thinking of them going forward.
I don't know if it's still the same. I know in Portsmouth, you can self-refer to occupational therapy. So they will do a certain amount of stuff with you and they'll go through. I remember when my eldest was quite young, sitting there for ages, where they were doing different coloured lines and they need to write on a red line with a green pen and things like that. And we've not done it yet because we've not needed to, but we were told at the time, when it comes to exams, come back to me. I'll write a letter saying that this child needs these things for an exam.
When you say self-refer to occupational therapy, do you go through the GP?
No, I mean, I would literally Google occupational therapist, children, Fareham for you, and it should take you to from Portsmouth. You go to a page and there's a self-referral form that you print off and send in.
Thank you.
And so that's Portsmouth. I don't know if Fareham's the same. You might need to go through your GP depends on your relationship with your GP, just take a kind of comprehensive list of why it needs to be done.
After the communication from the school is broken down, does anybody know if there's a way of getting hold of his records so that I can kind of use those to help him forward his education?
Different schools will do different things. If you've not had a great relationship with them, they might not give them to you. So it's worth asking, because it can't do any harm. But the thing I would advise you to do, just if you do nothing else, is just go and talk to Julie Barker at Fairgross. She has got all the answers you need. She's like your one-stop shop for all things GCSE, SEN, assessments. She will be able to tell you everything. She knows everybody. But the other thing is as well, you don't need to stay on track. So you don't need to go along on an age, compared to where he would be at school. So, if he does his GCSEs at 17, what the hell? It doesn't matter. Don't feel pressured to keep up with anyone. Don't feel pressure, don't let him feel the pressure. He can do 2 a year for the next 5 years. Whatever's good for him, and Julie and the team there will just support you in whichever way he wants to do it. Honestly, sit and talk to her. They've got everything you need. Honestly, I can't praise them enough, and I can't up them enough for what they do.
Great, thank you. I hope that was helpful. We'll just move into the last question, and then there'll be a time for some questions. So the last question we had is, what are the possibilities for formal qualifications or alternatives?
Yes, so my 2 eldest are currently just finishing off their GCSEs, IGCSEs through Fairgross, which has been brilliant. So what I would say is when they turned sort of 11, 12ish, we started to think about what they might want to do. And I think one of the biggest bits of advice I would say is do your own research first. Don't kind of panic and think, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? It's to start looking yourself, and also think about what their goals might be. And I don't necessarily mean that that age they might not know what they want to do, but you've got a good idea of what they're interested in. And if you think that you're heading towards GCSEs, it's just really good idea to spend some time talking to people. Obviously we're here tonight, but things like the home ed exam wiki online is brilliant, because it not only tells you all the different courses you can do, and it's obviously there's so many you can do, it can be a bit overwhelming. There's very few things that you can't do, because there's always a way around it. It might be that you do an IGCSE instead of a GCSE, because then they haven't got the coursework aspect. But I think we're quite lucky, because we have quite a lot of home educator students locally. I think I'm right in saying people generally don't have any problems with college saying, hang on, what's an IGCSE? You haven't done GCSEs. I mean, we certainly haven't had any problem with it at all. And in fact, when we were trying to sort of say, oh, should they do GCSE maths or IGCSE math? One of the kind of benefits of IGCSE maths is that you can use calculators in all papers. So I emailed both colleges and I said, because one of my sons wants to do computer science, another one wants to do physics. So I said, should we be doing GCSE maths? And they both were like, no reason at all. Do IGCSEs, no problem. So that's Peter Simmons and Barton Peveril, both saying, yeah, no problem at all. So I think, we just started researching things. And I think for me, that the absolute sort of amazing thing about home ed is that you don't have to follow this awful prescribed thing of, you've got to do 8 or you've got to do 10. You've got to do English literature and geography or history, or you've got to do this because this is what the school does. You can basically choose what their interests are and choose something, have a look at it. If they hate it, well, don't do it then. So we tried, my 2 eldest who tried languages, they looked at doing history. They even thought about doing a GCSE in music at one point. And we just had a look at it. And if they weren't interested, we gave it up until they ended up with ones that they wanted to do. I think the other thing is with college, it can be difficult if you haven't got English language and you haven't got a pass in maths, because the funding follows that. So if your children want to go and do A levels, or even if they want to do a BTEC or T level, whatever it is now, it can make it more difficult. That's not to say they can't do it at college, but for us, I thought, well, you know, if they're already choosing subjects they want to do at college, they don't really want to be having to sit English and maths alongside that, because that's extra work. So it's worth looking into that and thinking about that as to whether, you know, at least to get, you know, English and math. But a lot of college courses now, if you're looking at GCSEs, they do want you to have 5. So, and that's kind of a minimum. So it's just there's a lot to think about and a lot of different options. But I know there are people here who, you know, haven't gone down the GCSE route. So obviously there are other opportunities and other ways of doing it. But certainly, I think just take your time and think about it, and you know, don't feel that you've got to go down a certain prescribed route because that's what school does. It's, you know, there's so much out there you can do. I think it's just important that they choose what they enjoy. When it gets to like this bit, when, you know, it's lots of revision and assessments and exams, you know, it just becomes a bit joyless, because it's quite hard. I mean, that's the only thing I would say is, you know, it is quite hard when you get to the end and they're revising, and it can feel a little bit teaching to the test. The joy of the learning can go out of it a bit because you've got to learn things in a prescriptive way for exams, but it's such a short period.
I've got Rachel with her hand up.
I was just going to say quickly, rather than worry about qualifications working from young to old, look at where they want to end up. So look at what the end, you know, position is, what kind of job do they want, and then find out what you need to do to get that job and work it backwards. So you're not, you know, don't spend time on qualifications. You know, it's great if they're academic and they do it really easily, you can go for 10 GCSEs or whatever. But if they're not, or even if they just, you know, if that's the way you choose, just find out what you need and work backwards. You know, to get to that point, I need this. How do I get to that point? We need this. And yeah, Kirsten's right, for any sort of further education courses, Maths and English GCSE. It's not all about academia. It's not all about GCSEs and A levels. There's so many different, the T levels, that's the ones they do at this new place up near the airport, you know, all the technical qualifications, which is sort of equivalent of A levels, but obviously with engineering and mechanics and stuff like that. It's not all just one route, work backwards.
Thank you, Rachel. Peter.
I've just got Kez nudging me because I got into college without any GCSEs and then went on to get a degree with honours. I went to the college for an open day. Not having done GCSEs at school, I think gave me an opportunity to delve into what I wanted more for my future. So by the time I hit even looking at college, I knew that I wanted to get into music and production and events. So tried to looked at the courses that would lead to that as a final place for my career. Just went and spoke to the college on an open day, and they said that there are exceptional circumstances that they let people in. Home education is one of those. So all I had to do was like just an assessment really to see where I was at with my English and maths, which I must have done quite well at because I got in. And they were happy with me. You do functional skills as part of the course anyway, whether you have GCSEs or not. I did that anyway and just got those qualifications while doing the BTEC and then the next BTEC and then the degree.
Thank you, Peter. Paula.
For us as a family, we've moved so far away from even thinking about GCSEs and A levels, and there's so many different things you can do. There's so many different routes you can take. There's so many different opportunities that come your way, especially when they're not following that route and having to spend a lot of time, spend much time revising and the like. The opportunities that have come our way have come out of the blue very unexpectedly. They've taken very unexpected turns between the ages of 15 and 19. And I'm aware that if we had gone down the exam route, each of them would have likely missed those turning points that came. Just speaking personally, and I'm not anti exams, and I think families, absolutely should have the freedom to just to work out the journey for themselves, So just speaking personally for us, I found it really beneficial for my children to have that time, those years free, to have the time and the freedom to pursue their interests, to change their minds. It's a time of life where you pick up on new things and run with those unexpectedly, things that you didn't even have any interest in before. So from my perspective, those years can offer so much and can throw so much up. I'm pleased the way that we fell into it. As I say, we didn't have a plan to go that route. It was mainly because my eldest was so adamant that she was not going to be assessed by anybody. Thank you very much. So that was like, that took us completely by surprise. We thought, oh, well, how do we do this, you know? But thankfully, because she was quite set on that, we had to open ourselves up to the possibilities of going other routes. And she always wanted to do historical costume design. She'd been wrapping her sister in fabric since she was 3. That was what she knew. She'd self-studied the history and taught herself to sew and had just run with it. And she started volunteering at a National Trust property when she was 15. Very quickly learnt corsetry, became very good at that, and because she was quite proficient across the board as well, she then took over training the other volunteers in styling, and then, because she was quite computer savvy as well, took over the costume project and getting everything, getting a system up and running, and then the marketing. And it was a really good, what I'm describing is it was a really good place for her environment, for her to get experience across the board and across all different departments. She was head of wardrobe on a film when she was 19. That was her first film. And the thing about that was that when we asked around in the industry as to whether she should go degree route, everyone said, well, she could, but we would suggest, she's there already at 16. Why would you stop that? Put the brakes on. Once she's gotten to the end of that, she's going to have to work for years for free to gain her skills and experience in order to be where she could be next year. That worked out as they said. So that was a really good example. It was a really good lesson to us of how well it can work. So I say to parents all the time, do if they want to do GCSEs, fine, but please only if they want to. If they don't want to, there's so many other things they could do. I really think that the most important thing is their peace of mind. The other thing I always harp on about is the fact that at that age, there's so much going on with your body. There's so much going on with your hormones, your chemistry and your brain, and your relationships and your friendships and everything. There's so much going on. That is enough to be dealing with. And if studying for exams fits into that and doesn't interfere with that, fine. If it does, then that's the first thing to go, to my mind. The most important thing is their relationship with you. If it's getting in the way of their relationship with you, then it can wait. They can do it at any time. They can jump on that train at any time, and far better that they do it happily and from their own sort of desire of what they want to do and from their own confidence in what they want to do, and at a time when actually they've got an edge on everyone else in terms of confidence and life experience. I mean, each one of my children has got an amazing story in terms of how things have unfolded for them, and I'm just aware that unfolding would not have happened if they had been heads down following this idea that we were all conditioned with in terms of, well, you do this at this age in this way. They're there to do if it fits in with you, but make sure it fits in with you and fits in with them and everyone's happy.
Thank you, Paula. That's really helpful. So anyone have any questions for anyone?
This was just a question for Peter. I was wondering, before you got to the college without GCSEs, how were you planning not to do them and then just to see, or were you kind of trying to do them and not? How did you see your future few years when you were in those ages?
Was that for Peter?
Yes. Did that make sense?
Yeah. So it was, did you already decide you weren't going to do the GCSEs how did that journey unfold? Yeah.
I was never going to do GCSEs once I'd left school. There wasn't really the opportunity to do them in Essex at that time. You had to pay a lot of money to even consider doing it, so that just wasn't really an option for us. So I just had to look at what I could do without GCSEs, but thankfully that didn't get in the way anyway. So
that's good to know.
So confidence is a big thing. So obviously we're coming from a world where we have been within the education system, and as time goes on, I am seeing the huge differences, like the lady before was saying about the relationship that you have with your children and making sure that that's the most important thing. However, My problem is he wants to be an equine vet, and I feel like if I don't push him to do the exams and study, he's not going to get where he wants to be, and then that's going to be my fault. So my question is, where is the balance when when you've got a child that has expressed, and he's literally been into horses since he was little. He's a big giant boy. He has always been like hitting a round peg into a square hole as far as school's concerned. So I've now got this young man that has an absolute specific career he wants to follow. It's obviously going to be quite costly. Where is the balance in pushing him enough to succeed, but not becoming that naggy, annoying person that obviously none of us really want to be?
We've got a couple of hands raised. Rachel?
I was going to say they have open days at Sparsholt College. A lot of home editors go on from there. I've seen loads of people go there. I would take him. Mine always take it better from someone else. I'm the nagging old mum, and they don't want to listen to me. But if you can take him to the college and say, let them tell him what he needs to do, get it from someone else.
Thank you.
Heston, did you have something to say on that?
Yes, so one of my older two sons, he had the worst time at school. So I would say he was quite traumatised by his experience at school. And in fact, if I'm honest, I don't think he's ever really got over it. Now he's older, and we've spent, the first couple of years of coming out of school, we spent a lot of time, as I said, just like playing and kind of getting over that restrictive situation that was at school, but also talking a lot about what happened and how he felt about it and processing it. But it has left a lasting problem for him. Definitely. With academics, because whenever we sit down, it doesn't matter if it is me, and obviously it is easier having Fairgos, because as you say, it's someone else, and that's one of the massive benefits of Fairgos for us, was because it is that other person saying, well, here's your homework, you've got to get it in a week's time. So that does help, and it kind of backs up what you're saying at home, when it's someone else saying, well, if you want to achieve this and you're going to go down a certain route of doing GCSEs, for example, or whatever route it is, this is kind of what you need to do to get there, and this is the time frame. But even so, he really, really struggles with it, because it is almost like a phobia. So, I think it kind of just evokes such pain, sort of difficult memories for him of the experience. We have had long periods where we've just let it go. Initially, he wanted to do 10. They all had to be grade 9, otherwise he was a failure. And, we talked a lot about it, and I was saying, look, you don't have to do 10, you don't have to do 8, just do what you feel comfortable with. But he has had these ideas of wanting to get as many as possible, which he's had to compromise on. And we've had periods of time where he's done nothing. I can say that. I know it's not what you say if the local authority turns up on your doorstep, but there have not been days, there have been months where he couldn't cope with it. And what he could cope with was just life, or playing games, or going out seeing his friends. And so I would just keep, he would always go to Titchfield. He would always go to his lessons, but homework wouldn't get done, or I'd sort of lay things out, or say, he'd get up that one morning and I'd say, right, shall we do something? Yeah, if he wants to do it, great. If he doesn't, he's had to find that motivation himself. And he's pretty much, with the help of Fairgos, kind of done physics in a year, well, less than a year really, because it's not like a full academic year because of coronavirus. Everything has been early, but he's doing it. He struggles with it, but he has got his own motivation. So I think if your son's got the motivation, it might be a bit of a rocky road, but eventually he'll get where he wants to go, because it's got to come from him. He's got to want to do it. We just keep lines of communication open, and I'm not saying we haven't had fallouts, and obviously sometimes it's been quite stressful when they say they want to do it, but then they're not able or willing to do the work that you think, oh, are we ever going to get there? But here we are. He's already got 2 GCSEs and he's doing another 5. We've just got English out of the way last week, and he studies when he feels able to, and it's driven by him. And I still think he's going to do fine. And you know, if he doesn't do as well as he'd like to, there are other options, you know, that will, it's not going to be a disaster. It's, you know, we say it's great, but it's not who you are. These GCSEs are not you. They're just part of your toolbox. It's what, you know, what you're doing. So there's always going to be another option to resit things, or as other people have said, look at other routes and other ways of doing it.
Thank you.
I think we've got another question from Hannah.
My daughter has been going to Fairgross since September, and she is desperate to do like criminology and wants to be a detective in the police force and things like this. So she's got a clear idea of what she wants to do. However, she's not massively keen on like GCSEs, and gets stressed and has social anxiety around exams and sitting in the exam room, and the whole just sitting there in silence, like, you know, just doing exams. But I don't know. I mean, obviously, I know that some of you have said like you can get into college without GCSEs. I didn't know this until now. So, I mean, but I don't know if criminology is one of those things that you can get into without any GCSEs. So I really don't know. Like, she's been at school her whole life, so I don't really know anything other than the school system. So I'm trying to learn, but obviously it's a bit nervous for me, because I'm like, oh yeah, if I say to her, let's not do GCSEs, but she still wants to do criminology, what if I mess her up?
Sally?
What I would say to that is approach it from a different angle. So if you think that she might want to go on and do a criminology degree, you can contact any university, the criminology department. They will have a lecturer who will be able to tell you what you need to get in. That may or may not include GCSEs. Usually they can tell you different routes. Contact your local police department. Find someone doing that job and speak to them. Ask them how they got there, because there are usually more than one route on doing that. You just need to speak to some actual real people and find some different ways.
Thank you. Paula, did you want to say something?
Just really quickly, hopefully, or just offering some encouragement on what's just been talked about. On one of the things that encouraged us was on, you know, on any university or college or course, on their entry requirements page, you'll get that list of requirements, and then you will always get at the bottom, occasionally we are happy to accept candidates that do not have these. You know, they will always put that on the bottom. They're not going to put themselves in a position where they are saying no to someone who is going to be perfect for them. So there will always be other ways in. Another encouragement I wanted to offer was that of all the children we've seen go up through the Farnham group over the years, the ones who have been either quite damaged by their school experience, or who are resistant to any sort of formal approach, you know, right up until sort of 16, 17, 18, they have then at that point many times just gone to college without any qualifications, having taken any exams, and, you know, once they've found the thing they want to do, just got on with it. It really doesn't need to be an obstacle to pursue the thing that you want to pursue. You know, I've seen that time and time again. You know, it's very difficult, because most of us went through a system, you know, that put so much emphasis on these GCSEs, you know, and the results, and we're constantly told this is the time when you know, make or break your life, basically. And because, you know, we feel that pressure, you know, it's difficult for us to remember that actually I can't remember what I got, and I don't know what my husband, you know, it's all pretty irrelevant by the time you're on the next step. Universities also really value home educated children applying for their courses. They love home educated kids because they have much more of just a range of interests. They have much more that they're getting on with. Admissions at universities are constantly saying how frustrating it is being presented with all these A-star students that they cannot differentiate between. Even at interview stage, it's very difficult to differentiate between them, because they've all got the same and had the same experience. And I think having a more tailored approach puts you at a far greater advantage, to be honest. There will always be other access routes into the courses that they want to do when they want to do it.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Paula. That's encouraging. B.
Hello, just a quick one. With criminology, my son almost took it at college. And when we were interestingly for Havant College, when we were filling out the application form, there's a whole section for home educated children where you can kind of list your experiences and your passions. And like Sally said, you can get in contact with the college. They're really communicative. and you can speak to them about what you would need to do if you weren't going to follow the traditional route. And I think at college, it's not actually an A-level, it's a different qualification, it's equivalent, but it can be taken at college too. So sort of chip in on that one. Thanks.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. Claire.
Hi, sorry, yeah, I just wanted to add that my husband actually went to university in his late 30s while we were home educating. And, well, he left school with 2 GCSEs and went to university in his late 30s and got a master's degree. But he said it was really interesting. The very first day, they all sat there and they were told, what we're going to do now for this first year is teach you how to work on your own, how to study on your own. We're going to undo all the damage that school's done. We're going to teach you how to form an opinion of your own, not one that's being told to you, and you're learning from, you're going to learn how to learn for yourself, which is what home educated kids arrive at university with. And interestingly as well, our next door neighbour is actually a lecturer at college. And when he first moved in, we had that whole awkward conversation where I said, we're chatting, and what do you do? He's, I'm a college lecturer in politics. I was like, oh man, here we go. So what do you do? I home educate my kids. And he was so enthusiastic about it. And he said, it's fantastic. I've had a couple of home educated kids through and they're brilliant. They can actually think for themselves. And that was his biggest thing, is they're actually capable of thinking for themselves. Whereas all the kids we get through school only know what they're told. They don't know how to think for themselves. So like everyone else said, I think there's a lot of advantages. And I think more and more universities are seeing that. And again, it's not just about, I think in school, you are have to spend so much time working on GCSEs, you've got no time for anything else. Whereas doing things like my eldest one's doing is a young leader at Scouts and things like that, and volunteering in charity shops, going to teach all the other home ed kids guitar, stuff like that. All those experiences are actually really, really valuable in their own right and go beyond being able to pass a GCSE.
We're nearly at time. We've just had a question in, so we'll do our best to answer that quickly. Susie's asking, how can you motivate an older child who doesn't seem to have any direction on what they want to do? Would anyone like to offer some advice over that? Thank you, Kirsten.
I learned from experience, the worst thing you can do is try to sort of worry about it and think, oh my God, what are we going to do if they're not going to do GCSEs, or they've got no interest. I think the motivation has to come from them. You can encourage, but I think it's too easy to get into a battle if it's all coming from you. So, my husband's actually much better than I am at kind of relaxing, even, which is funny because he was the one initially that so much, if they come out of school, we must try and keep up with the national curriculum and we must do this and that and the other. And he's so much more so in the last couple of years been, well, it's there. He knows it's there. We've talked about options. We've looked at various things. They're young men, and at the end of the day, it's their lives. And we're not here to dictate to them, we're here to encourage and support and help. As nail-biting as that might sometimes be as a parent, I think, the most important thing is to keep connection there and remember that being their friend, being their confidant, letting them talk, letting them relax, letting them explore. You can try and talk about, what they're interested in, what different routes they might have. But I think building relationships, keeping your relationship open and fun, and exploring things together. So it's a journey together rather than you sort of saying, oh, this is what you must do, or this is how you should do it. It should be a team. You're a team, and you're both trying to get to the end result of your happy, healthy child that enjoys life and finds what they're interested in. So I've been amazed at just what my sons are capable of in terms of, when they've explored online and they've got all these different amazing things they do with it, and then they start getting interested in YouTube, and just where it takes them is amazing. So it might not be what you think they should be doing, especially like, if it's gaming or something, you think, oh gosh, shouldn't you be doing something academic, or perhaps you should be opening a book. But actually, when they do follow their interests, it's amazing where it does take them, and you just got to keep encouraging and being interested, even if you don't know what they're talking about sometimes.
Thank you so much. I've got Rachel and Sally with their hands up.
Sorry, I was just going to say quickly, just do small bits. You don't have to try and do a whole curriculum. You don't have to try and do a whole year's work or anything. Just do tiny little bits. And if she's interested in one particular thing, say she's interested in flowers, you can interweave English and history and even maths. Do you know what I mean? You can put so many topics in through the sort of cover of learning about flowers. Not all learning is obvious. You know, it doesn't have to look like maths to be maths. So it's that kind of thing. It really is thinking outside the box sometimes.
So I'll really quickly just give my experience of my 14-year-old who has never wanted to do anything academic, to the point where whenever we've never wanted to force him, but when we've just offered that as an option, he gets very stressed out, has no idea what he wants to do with his life, like literally none, and that causes him a lot of anxiety. So we decided just to stop talking about it and actually just focus. I've spent the last few months just focusing on connecting with him. We play a lot of video games together recently, and then from that he's decided that actually that might be something he wants to do. So now that's something we'll go on to explore, what different career paths there are in video game design, and figure out if that's something that there's an area there that he would like. There are different ways of doing things. You can take the academic approach, and you can also choose not to do that. You need to figure out which one works for your child.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you to everyone who's contributed this evening. Thank you for your ideas, your input, your wisdom. It's really appreciated. If anybody wants to follow this up, would like to contact us, you can contact us at the Portsmouth Home Education page through Messenger, and we'd be happy to help. Thank you very much for listening.